Section 4. Creating a breath sequence. As we've discussed in great detail, the breath is a powerful tool that we can use to influence everything from our health to our happiness. Every breathing technique we learn is like another tool added to our box, with most of these tools being multi-purpose. But, like most multifunctional tools, they are never as good as a device that was specifically designed for a singular purpose. If you're an artist, for example, you might have an array of brushes that you use to achieve specific effects. If you're a poet or a writer, the meanings of the words that you use vary dramatically depending on the context in which you use them. And if you're a storyteller, how you structure the plot and develop the characters can captivate the listener or take them on an emotional ride that immerses them in the story. Creating a breath practice to effect positive change and influence in our health and well-being is not much different. A breathing technique that has a plethora of uses can be modified and improved for a more precise application. For example, the victorious breath, Ujjayi Pranayama, increases energy and stimulates sympathetic tone through increased respiration and deeper breathing. The technique used to create the Ujjayi sound can also stimulate parasympathetic tone by increasing pressure on the vagus nerve. By modifying the Ujjayi technique, we can get more of what we want and less of what we don't. So, we customize each technique by changing the lengths of the inhalation and exhalation or the durations of the breath holds. We can combine 2 or 3 pranayama practices, pulling specific elements from each one to create a new exercise that physically or energetically brings us closer to our goal or intent. We can also sequence multiple techniques to give context to the breath and accentuate the effects of each method. Pranayama and even Western breathing exercises such as the 4-7-8 breath and the recovery breath are usually practiced unaccompanied by other breathing exercises. Doing a singular exercise can be like painting with a broad brush. It covers a lot of area but doesn't get the fine detail we need to create a compelling work of art. Sometimes I see 2 or 3 pranayama techniques practiced together, but the combination doesn't move towards a specific goal. Why we are doing these particular exercises together is not often understood. Usually, there was no overlying intent for the practice to begin with. A breath practice without cohesion is like a yoga class in which the teacher calls out a series of random poses that have no relationship or flow. We might receive a small benefit, but because the class is all over the place, we don't get as much out of it as we would if the class had targeted a specific intent or purpose. Any conscious breathing, whether it is a single exercise or a combination of techniques, will have positive effects. However, when we set an intent and choose specific methods to accomplish that purpose, the benefits we receive will be so much more significant. Breath sequence considerations. There are a few things to consider when doing a breath practice or teaching a practice to others. What is the goal or intent? Which pranayama or breathing exercises work towards that goal? How can we change or modify these techniques to better fit our intent? How can we pair a breathing exercise with another one to accentuate the desired effect of each technique? How can we sequence the different techniques to create a cohesive practice that energetically moves in a way that is conducive to our goal or intent? How long should the breath practice be? Let's look at each of these questions individually. What is our goal or intent? These may seem to be the same thing. Often they feel similar or overlap, but we should view them differently. The goal is what we are trying to achieve or work towards with the practice. The intent is about why we are working towards that goal. When setting the goal, it is essential to consider the intent behind it. Often, the intent helps us choose the right exercises to accomplish the goal. For example, if your goal was to hold your breath longer, you would ask yourself, why do I want to hold my breath longer? The benefits of holding the breath range from increasing athletic performance in VO2 max to lowering blood pressure and heart rate to calming the mind for meditation. The way to approach breath retention for increasing athletic performance is very different from the method with which we practice holding the breath to prepare the mind for meditation. What if the goal is not about holding the breath longer, but is meditation? Then you can refine your intent to clarify why you want to meditate. Do you want to meditate to feel more equanimous as you prepare for your day, or do you want to meditate on moving into deep relaxation as you end your day? The process of defining a goal and understanding the intent behind it should lead us to a place where the goal and the intent are in perfect harmony. Arriving at this point will make it easy to choose and modify the techniques for the practice. Which pranayama or other breathing exercises will work towards our goal or intent? It's important to have a decent understanding of the different pranayama techniques outlined in Section 3 and their effects. not only to understand them intellectually, but to have experienced them through hours of practice. When we try to choose the best breathing practices to support the achievement of a goal, we search first for broad stroke brushes we can refine later. When choosing the techniques for each practice, consider the following: the energetic effects, the emotional or spiritual effects, and the physical effects. The energetic effects will increase energy, decrease energy, or create balance, generally based on how it affects our autonomic nervous system and other balance systems. If the goal of the breath sequence is to be more alert in the morning, then we want to choose more energizing practices. Conversely, if it is to help with deep sleep, we want calming practices. For the most part, practices with a faster respiratory rate have an energizing effect, such as Bhastrika or Kapalabhati. Slower respirations and holds have a calming effect, such as Vishamavitri or any Kumbhaka practice, and more equal ratio breathing practices have an energetic balancing effect, like Samavitra or Durga Savasam. Finding the right practice to help with an emotional or spiritual goal can be challenging and requires a little more understanding of the nadis, gunas, and pranavayus. Also, when the goal is emotional or spiritual, setting a strong intent can have more of an impact than the chosen pranayama practice. The practice then becomes secondary to energetically support the intent. Each Eastern system of balance can be used as a map to guide us in support of the intention. Consult the graphs and descriptions in the book to find the nadi, guna, or pranavayu that best represents your emotional or spiritual goal. Then find the corresponding breathing practices on the pranayama effects. For example, if the goal is equanimity, we can use a practice that promotes the Sushumna Nadi, such as Nadi Shodhana. If the intent is about compassion, we can look to Sattva Guna and use Samavitri for breathing practice. For an intent such as creating more intimacy, we would want to focus on Apanavayu, and we can choose Viluma 2 to help support intention. When determining which breathing exercises move towards achieving a physical or health-related goal, we generally start by asking a few questions relating to our desired physiological outcome. Is the trait affected by either increased or decreased levels of carbon dioxide and blood pH? Does this attribute receive a benefit from increasing nitric oxide levels? How does the state of our autonomic nervous system affect the physical outcome relating to the goal? You can use the charts shown or revisit the effects of nitric oxide to choose the exercises that will help achieve the goal. The better your understanding of the physiological effects of breathing and the nervous system, the easier this will be. For example, if the goal is to lower blood pressure, then we would look for practices that increase carbon dioxide, since we know that higher CO2 levels decrease blood pressure. Any type of Kumbhaka practice will be effective. For certain intent, we might need to refine some of our questions or search outside the box. For example, if the goal is to run faster, we want to think about the things that boost our athletic performance, such as increasing VO2 max and lung capacity. For VO2 max, we want exercises that lower our SpO2 to make more oxygen-carrying red blood cells, such as Bhayakumbhaka or Viloma 2. And for lung capacity, we know that Viloma 1 and Durga Savasam are great practices. How can we change or modify a breathing technique to better fit our goal or intent? We experience several effects from every breathing technique. Each practice has either an emotional impact, which is the influence on our energetic body, such as the gunas, vayas, or nadis, or a physiological effect, which is how the breath influences the autonomic nervous system, stimulating either the sympathetic nervous system, the dorsal vagal complex, or the ventral vagal complex. Both the science-based Western approach of the autonomic nervous system and polyvagal theory and Eastern philosophical yoga view of the subtle energy bodies are essentially maps of our emotions, spirit, and vigor. The two systems work together like different languages describing the same things. For example, the sympathetic nervous system, Rajas, Gunas, Pingali Nadi, Udavayu, and Vyanavayu all relate to how energy increases or expands. The dorsal vagal complex, Tamasguna, Ida Nadi, Apanavayu, and Samanavayu all express how energy decreases or contracts. The ventral vagal complex, Sattva Guna, Sushumna Nadi, and Pranavayu all describe balance and harmony. Each map points out certain nuances. When we know the goal and intent, we can choose whether it makes sense to focus on practices that emphasize one system or whether it is better to draw from all the energetic systems. This high level of detail is not critical but can help us pick the right practices for our carefully thought out intent. If in doubt, choose practices that move towards the overall energetic goal, i.e., increasing or expanding energy, decreasing or contracting energy, or balancing energy. The breath practice also affects our physiology by changing our blood chemistry and influencing our autonomic nervous system. We can use our knowledge of how speeding up or slowing down the breath or adding retention changes blood pH and carbon dioxide levels to modify every breath practice to better suit our intent. We can also combine breathing exercises that have other physiological effects, like increasing nitric oxide, to amplify or suppress the effects of other breath practices to enhance our intended result. As much of an influence as the autonomic nervous system has on our emotional and energetic body, it has an equal influence on the cardiac, respiratory, metabolic, digestive, and other biological systems. If I am trying to understand emotions and feelings, the polyvagal theory explains this better. However, when we look at how the autonomic nervous system affects our physiology, the traditional two-branch sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system theory is much more useful and easier to follow. Speeding up the breath or lengthening the inhalation affects the sympathetic nervous system. Slowing down the breath or extending the exhalation affects the parasympathetic nervous system. Using these simple methods, we can modify a breath practice to alter our blood pressure, heart rate, digestion, or other biological functions. Sometimes our intent will require us to look at both theories of the autonomic nervous system to find or modify the breathing practices that will help us accomplish our goal. After choosing a breathing technique, we evaluate all the effects of that practice that move us towards our goal or intent. Then we see if we can change things like the rate of breathing or the breath ratio to help us achieve it. For example, if we want a practice that is emotionally balancing yet physically energizing, we can speed up the respirations for Nadi Shodhana. Or if we have two exercises that are synergistic, like Nadi Shodhana and box breathing, we may want to combine them to create a new exercise. Along with desired results, a breath practice often has other outcomes that could be counterproductive to our goal and intent. Sometimes modifying the practice diminishes the unwanted side effects, and sometimes we need to alter the practice to attain the effects we want. For example, if we are trying to increase our energy with Bhastrika Pranayama, but we don't want the adverse effects that come with hyperventilation, we can use a breath retention practice to increase our CO2 levels. If the changes still leave us with undesired effects, we might want to opt for another technique or sequence the breath practice with other breathing exercises that help highlight the overall intent. In other words, multiple modifications are available, and every practice can be adapted to serve our needs. Finally, we can determine if we can integrate any other breathing practices or components of a technique to improve the energetic or physiological effects of the sequence. How can we pair a breathing exercise with another exercise to accentuate the desired effect of each technique? So much of our understanding of life comes from context. Whether it's a situation, a word, or in this case, a breathing exercise, the framework in which we experience a thing gives it much, if not more, meaning than the thing itself. We experience this every day as we communicate. A word in one sentence has a different meaning in another. For example, we can all agree that love means something different when I say I love my mother versus I love my partner, versus I love burritos. The three statements share the connotation of having an affinity towards something, but your love for your partner is different than your love from burritos. Sometimes context can change a word's meaning or even its pronunciation. Take the word tear. I tear the paper versus I cried a single tear. Because of context, we can take a breathing practice like Kumbhaka and without modifying it, combine it with other exercises that will help increase athletic performance or promote relaxation. In yoga, for example, a good teacher will create a sequence of poses that move the class towards a specific goal or intent, such as opening the hips, back bending, or doing forward folds. Or the teacher might have an energetic intention and choose poses that express the qualities of that energy. Many postures have multiple purposes. For example, Kamatakarasana, the posture better known as Wild Thing, influences several physical benefits such as opening the hips and psoas, deepening back bends, stretching the side bodies, strengthening the arms and legs, and more, but it doesn't do any of them that well. For every benefit of Wild Thing, there is another pose that does it better. However, when Wild Thing is used in the context of back bending or a hip opening class, it adds variety and interest to other movements and the intent of the class through that pose. A skilled yoga teacher can take a standard pose like Wild Thing and modify it slightly to make it work even better for the overall intent of the class. Bhramari Pranayama is amazing for increasing nitric oxide, and because of the wide array of effects that nitric oxide has, we must choose other breathing practices to highlight the effects we want. For example, If we combine Bharami with Nadi Shodhana, the calming and balancing effects of Nadi Shodhana will enhance the relaxing effects created by the increased nitric oxide. If we add Brahmi to the energizing and lower chakra stimulating Agni Sar practice, we can show how nitric oxide increases libido. Adding context to a breathing exercise by placing it with other similar and synergistic breathing exercises creates meaning that defines the intent. The exercises in a sequence should have variety and portray different parts of the story that lead to the same conclusion. How can we link various breathing techniques to create a cohesive practice that energetically moves towards our goal or intention? If you've ever worked out, gone running, or taken a yoga class, you probably started with some sort of warm-up, moving into the more physical part, and concluded with a cool down and some stretches. Most people don't start with sprints or try to hit their personal records without adequate preparation. With fitness, most people follow some sort of energetic arc. When I teach a yoga class, I structure the sequence using an energetic arc called a sequence wave, which includes an opening, a gentle warm-up, a heat-building component, a dynamic or vitalizing component, a cool-downs or savasana, and a closing. I slowly build up the energy of the class, come to a crescendo in the sequence, and then bring the energy back down. A good sequence creates a narrative that pulses like a compelling story through every aspect of the class. The warm-up and heat-building sections foreshadow more difficult poses revealed in the dynamic component, and they resolve in the cool-down. The way I create a breath sequence follows many of the same principles. When creating a breath sequence, think of it as a story where the essence of the narratives weaves a cohesive intent with every breathing sequence and pranayama exercise. The overall intent of the sequence should be experienced in each exercise, leading us down a clear path to express our goal. The entirety of the sequence should feel like the rise and fall of a single deep breath that starts easy and then expands with intensity. The deeper the inhalation, the more challenge we experience until we reach the apex of inspiration and release it to descend the exhalation, concluding with a harmonious resolution. How long should the breath practice be? Having a breath practice is similar to having a meditation practice, yoga practice, or fitness routine. There is no specific amount of time that we should practice breathing. It's best to start with a length that you feel comfortable and build up from there. When I teach students how to practice meditation on their own, I encourage them to start by doing 5 minutes a day and build a habit. A mistake many people make when it comes to adding anything new into their lives is they start with more than they can handle and quit before they can either establish a routine or experience the benefits in order to understand the value of the practice. Even though 5 minutes a day won't have much impact compared to 30 or an hour, creating a daily habit is paramount. It is the same with fitness. Working out every day for 5 minutes is better than working out once a month for 2.5 hours. When we create a habit, it is easy to incrementally increase the time we dedicate to it without radically changing your daily routine. The more time we dedicate, the more benefits we receive, but the key is consistency. Creating a short breath sequence is often difficult because each component of the sequence may contain multiple time-bound breathing exercises that are not practical to remove. Still, a 10-minute sequence can be manageable and sufficient for certain intent. Emotional and energetic changes can be experienced quickly. Even in a few breaths, we begin to feel a difference. Despite these quick energetic changes, most physical goals are difficult to achieve with a short practice. Significant physiological change typically manifests after prolonged application. For example, we can immediately change our blood pH and affect our autonomic nervous system, but for longer lasting results, we need to spend more time in the practice, especially if we center the practice on breath retention. If all you have is 5 minutes, then doing a 5-minute practice is better than not doing anything at all. You quickly want to establish a 10 to 15-minute daily practice and then gradually increase to 30 minutes or longer daily. Once you maintain a 30-minute daily breathing practice for a few months, you'll be an expert on how long or short you should make your practice to keep it effective. Changing the duration of a breath sequence is simple. As detailed in the following section, breath sequences have 4 sections or components. Each component consists of 1 or more breathing exercises. To lengthen or shorten a sequence, we change the number of repetitions of each exercise. For example, if the first component includes 1 exercise consisting of 5 repetitions totaling 2.5 minutes, and we want to increase the duration to 5, we double the repetitions. In short, we can add or take away from each exercise until we arrive at the duration we want. When choosing how long or how many repetitions for each breathing exercise, evaluate the duration you need to practice in order to feel the results. The best way to determine this is to practice each technique and determine when you start to notice changes, such as feeling calmer or having more energy. With breathing sequencing, we are working with two factors, the length of each individual section and the overall length of the sequence. Both should be considered. Let your intention guide you. I find that mine usually leads me to the right place if I take the time to listen.